Hey guys, today I wanted to do a video on some of these batteries that I found that I salvaged from an old Dyson pack. Also talk about this new charger that I got sent recently. I'll go through, I suppose I should just start at the beginning. One of the things I like doing every now and then if I get the chance to is I'd like going through some of these old e-recycling bins. Sometimes you find some good stuff in there. You might get a laptop, you might get some electronics that you can fix up. On this particular occasion, I found an old Dyson vacuum cleaner. I think it was a V6 cleaner, and it had the battery pack attached to it. Just wouldn't charge. I do have my own Dyson at home, but it wouldn't charge the battery pack. It would just sort of run for a second. The cleaner would run for a second and then turn off. So I decided to open up the battery pack, have a look at what was inside, and lo and behold, I found 6 of these 18650 cells, seemingly in pretty good condition. But of course, how are you going to tell whether they're in good condition or whether they're actually safe to use? I didn't have the proper gear in terms of chargers. I had a couple of old 18650 chargers. That's when I contacted my friend Tim McMahon, who has his own flashlight channel. I'll link that in the description. He's very knowledgeable in electronics. Pretty much anything to do with flashlights he'll know about. And he was kind enough to send me this Xtar VC8 charger. And really thankful for that because I think battery safety is so important. Especially when you're testing these sort of batteries, you have no idea whether one of them's been worn out and the others are okay, whether they're safe to use, checking their internal resistance. So the Xtar VC8 allows you to do a whole variety of things. You can charge almost any lithium cell that you find in a flashlight from the 10440 up until the 26650. It doesn't fit the 26800. It's probably a few millimeters short. But, I've got a flashlight. I've got the L8 that will allow me to charge that. Anyway, another cool thing is that it also charges those 1.2 volt nickel metal hydride batteries. So I've got one of them here just to demonstrate as well in terms of the size. So charges protected cells, which is great. I've only got unprotected cells these days because they just allow a much higher draw for my flashlights. You can see here on the charger there's a couple of buttons, and this is a fantastic charger because when I got it in the mail I didn't realize just how big this thing was. I've only had chargers that just have 2 slots in here. This can pretty much charge anything. You can put any combination of batteries in here and it independently charges each one and measures each battery separately, which I think is fantastic. So anyway, I decided to give this one a try. I'll show you some of the functions. I'll have to put a battery in first, so let's try this one. Just drop this one in, the 18650 cells. So you can see that display comes on and immediately starts to charge it, okay? The first figure there is just the voltage of the cell. The second figure there is the charging rate, so 400 milliamps. And then here you have got a kind of indicator of what type of cell it is and whether the cell is charging or discharging. I'll talk more a bit about that later. So if you hit this current button, what you'll find is that you can select how fast the cell actually charges. There are some limits built in here. For example, I think at the start and the end of the charging cycle at 4.2 volts, I don't think it's going to charge any more than maybe 500 milliamps. So that's a limitation. But normally you can chuck in a whole bunch of batteries and charge them at a fairly high rate. Though I do find when you have a bunch of them in here, like maybe 4 or 5, they only charge at about 1000 milliamps. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how this figures out. I think it also depends on the charging capacity of the power brick that you have. I'm just using an old phone charger, and I think it's got a pretty low capacity. This actually supports QC 3.0 fast charging, so if you have a charger that supports that, it's probably best to use that. I've just got an old Huawei charger attached onto here, so I don't think it's actually hitting its maximum potential in terms of charging speed. So anyway, clicking on that, like I mentioned before, you can sort of change how fast a cell charges. If you go into, let's put in a few more, okay? So I'll just drop in a bunch of these cells. Let's see what happens. And you can see, look at that, they all start to show up on the screen. These 4 are reflected here. Then you got channel 5 to channel 8 reflected on that right hand side like this. Really cool. You've got just tells you tells you the charging status as well. You see some of them are flashing full because they're completely charged. Now the interesting thing though that I've found is that some of the bays don't charge to 4.2 volts. So you can see this one here, that one here charges to 4.19, and these two are sort of 4.2. But there are a couple of bays that don't, and Xtar do mention as well in their specifications for this charger that it's sort of plus or minus 0.05 volts. So that is to be expected. But it's funny because I actually swapped these cells over into another bay, and then it will charge it to the 4.2. So that's just something to keep in mind. I mean, I don't think it's good to charge your cells up until the 4.2 volts all the time anyway. It can stress the cell, but especially with those lights that have FET drivers, they run better when you've got they run brighter if you've got a fully charged cell in there. So at least for the start of its power up anyway. So as you can see, it's got all these cells in here. You can also add in other cells. Like I mentioned, this is a 16340 cell, and this is just a nickel metal hydride cell. And you can see there, look, it's flashing nickel metal hydride there. Okay, the bottom part of it you can see as well, the cell is charging. Okay, and I'll go through just a few more of the features. So one thing to remember is that the bays, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, have another function here, and what you can do is just hold down that mode function, and this puts it into grading mode. Okay, grading mode essentially discharges the cells down to, I think, about 2.6 volts, 2.7 volts, and then starts to measure the capacity of each of the cells. Once it gets down to 2.7 volts, you can see just how many milliamp hours that cell has. So this is really good because it allows you to see just how worn the cells are. You're not going to be, for example, these cells hold 2100 milliamps, so you don't want a cell that holds 400 to 500 milliamps. That's not going to be so good. And Store basically discharges the cells down to 3.7 volts, which is basically the best storage voltage to keep these lithium ion cells, keeps them in sort of healthy state. It doesn't do it on this side, interestingly, so you can only get it on this side. Another cool function which I used almost immediately is the function to check the internal resistance. So let me just go ahead and flick that. So you just press this button here, the display button, okay, and what it will do is that it shows, you can see here, the internal resistance, milliohms here, 14 milliohms, 19 milliohms, 34 and 34. Because these bays, the batteries in these bays are reading as full, it can't complete that calculation. You've kind of got to discharge the cell a little bit and then let it charge for a little bit for it to calculate that that score. Actually, this one's working. That's weird. So yeah, this one is pretty much nearing the end of its capacity. I've had this cell for over 10 years, so I'm just surprised this thing still works in my flashlight, but I don't think there's very much capacity left in that one. So I was talking to Tim, and he mentioned 100 milliohms to be a good indicator for a healthy cell. So anything that gets a bit close to that 100, you're probably you're probably getting to the end of that battery's lifespan. So I did actually complete this full grading test, and I did it on all these 6 batteries. So discharged all of them down to 2.6, 2.7 volts, and measured the capacity. And they measured between 1,700 milliamps all the way up to about 1,800 and something milliamp hours. So not too much degradation in the actual capacity, which I was surprised, considering that this was quite an old battery pack. But you can't beat free getting these 618 650 cells out of a bin like that. And of course, these require a little bit of fixing up here as well. So the only chargers that I have are these 2-bay chargers, 18650 chargers, and I find this one, the quality of it is just fantastic. You can charge any variety of cells in there. It measures each bay independently. It's got a whole bunch of functions in here. I really like that grading function. I think being able to test a battery's capacity, whether it's a new battery or whether it's an old battery, I think that's really good, just so that you know and you can sort of predict how long that battery will last in a particular flashlight. Just show you a few little things that I had to do with these batteries as well. So with these cells here, you notice I've actually got a bit of tape on there. This is a bit of Clapton tape or polyamide tape, and the reason why I had to use it on these cells was because there was some glue attached in the center of these cells when they were in the battery pack, and as I pulled the cells out, it actually tore the casing of it. And it's really important to make sure that if this ever happens, you either replace the casing or you add some of this tape very carefully around it, because this can cause a short when you're putting it in. You don't want any side of the battery to in some way connect to the positive terminal. That's going to potentially cause a fire and an explosion. So I'm very, very careful with lithium cells. I'm terrified of these things, really. Another thing to keep in mind when you're taking out these cells, check out, for example, check out the bottom of them. You notice these little markings there, and they're basically, these cells were connected by strips of metal that were spot welded. And I think they do this to help keep the cells together and to improve the electrical conductivity between the cells too. But this was quite a pain to get off. I had to use some pliers and pull off each of these metal connectors on top of these cells. You can still see there's parts of that metal which is permanently melted or welded into the tops and the bottom of these cells. These ones I'm kind of wary to use. The reason why is that if you notice the top, I've kind of dented the top of these cells a little bit. The bottoms of them look fine, but dented cells you need to be very, very careful with. I don't recommend using them at all. These four are in much better condition, as you can see, so no dents or anything like that. You know, no tears in the wrapping, and but you can still see these little marks at the bottom of the cells showing you where the little bits and pieces connect onto. So I had to use some pliers and tear them off, and it took a really long time. They're actually quite sharp as well, so you should be careful with them. So yeah, if you're thinking of doing anything like this, make sure that you get a good quality charger that can measure the internal resistance of the cell and just perform a grading test. That's going to make sure that you're safe when you're using the cells. So that's all I really wanted to talk about with these batteries. And you know, I think it's a great little thing if you can find some old cells, either from a battery pack, an old laptop battery pack, or a vacuum cleaner or something like that. You know, do a little search to see what they are, and potentially charge them up. You know, it's a free cell. If you're interested in getting this charger, I'll leave a link in the description. Also, make sure you check out Tim McMahon's YouTube channel, and I'll put that in the description as well. He was kind enough to send me this charger. I think he got a bit freaked out when he saw that I was using that 10-year-old 18650 charger. So thank you, Tim. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. If you want to see some more videos, make sure you like and subscribe.